Welcome to the Change Loves Company podcast, where I sit down with the creatives, fundraisers, social entrepreneurs, artists and activists, all with one thing in common. They're changing the world for the better through their work. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land I'm recording on today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders, past, present and emerging. Always was, always will be. Nimmity Zappert is a globally experienced founder and sales expert with over 25 years of leadership experience across Asia, Europe and Australia. She's led regional operations and commercial strategy across Southeast Asia, including Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam and many other places. And she's held senior international roles spanning the UK, Eastern Europe, the Middle East, Africa and the Indian subcontinent. She has a really deep expertise in sales, partnerships and team development and has helped build and scale businesses internationally in the enterprise software sector. But today, she brings this international insight into her two ventures: Authentic Selling, where she equips early-stage founders with the skills and tools to succeed in B2B sales, and All of the Good Things, an ethical e-commerce platform which promotes sustainable consumption and fair trade. Nimmity also has her own social enterprise and ethical brand, Afrobeads, which supports a community of women in Uganda by providing access to market for their handmade goods. From 2019 to 2024, Nimmity served as chair of the Fair Trade Association of ANZ, where she led strategy and community engagement to support access to markets and equitable trade for small producers. She is known for her ability to connect commercial strategy with social purpose and helps businesses grow with clarity, authenticity, and a global mindset. When Nimmity joined us in the studio, we talked about fair trade, community engagement, and where to for social enterprise in this rather dystopian age we seem to be living in. So, Nimmity, welcome to the studio. It's so nice to have you on Change Loves Company. How are you?
Well, thanks, Dominique, and I'm really pleased to be here.
Fantastic. So we're just going to jump straight in with the first question, which is tell me a little bit about the fair trade area, because you worked in it for a while and you're still sort of doing stuff with your own business, which we'll get to a bit later. But talk to me about, fair trade, where it's at, what are some of the challenges involved with it as well?
Yeah, sure. So fair trade, I always think of fair trade as being one of the first versions of social enterprise. It's been around for over 60 years. And I found it actually when I was doing a lot of work overseas, and I came back to Australia and I'd been doing a lot of travelling, and I was looking for something that actually impacted all of the things that I thought were needed in the world. So when you travel a lot, you see a lot of poor environmental things going on. You also see a lot of poverty and a lot of social issues. And I thought, what can I get involved in to sort of do something about those issues that I was really passionate about. I am still really passionate about. And so I connected with fair trade. And what I found is fair trade is, for me, something that actually does try and address the whole picture. So it starts with the people and very much around addressing poverty through trade, not aid. So it's not a charity model. It's a trade model. And that's where it is very much a social enterprise model. So it works on the principle of helping disadvantaged producers to give them access to market, and then within that model ensuring that you've got fair wages, good working conditions, no discrimination. There's actually 10 principles that it's based around, but it also covers the environment. So respect for the environment is also part of that. So it ticked all my boxes, and I also love the model being about empowering the artisans, the producers, the makers that produce the things that we buy, to help them build their own enterprises. So it's not about thinking of them as someone that we need to give charity to, but actually help empower and grow.
So that all sounds nice and neat and tidy, wonderful initiative. What are some of the challenges or pitfalls that people can come across when they start to sort of delve into this area or try to expand, I guess, too?
Well, I guess like any, there's always challenges. I'd say, on that bigger global level, because this is something that was founded, some decades ago, the concept of fair trade is sort of going through a bit of an evolution, because it does have a little bit of that Western world helping the poor people vibe, and that's something that it's evolving from, which is really good to see. But actually what's also happened over that time is there are actually enterprises, social enterprises, fair trade enterprises that are producers and makers that have become generational So it's now the sort of second, third generation that are running those very considerable enterprises, and they're businesses in their own right. And so they're sort of now university educated people, some of them, and they're bringing their own skills and expertise into the mix, which is really great to see. So it's helping to fix some of that, but I think we've still got a ways to go in that because the fair trade model is very much about connection and working together and that sort of global picture. I'd say on a more micro level, for me, in terms of actually working within the model, the concept is that we're removing the middleman and we're working directly with the makers where possible, and we're also helping to develop them. So depending on what that thing is that we're producing, so for example, I do the paper bead jewellery in my business. I'm working with a very micro group. So working with them to scale is one of the big challenges, and also getting the quality. So that can take a lot of time and input from the people, that are trying to sell it in market to work with the groups. And so there's definitely challenges around helping them, but also keeping it a viable business.
Yeah. And so how did so your current enterprise is Afro Beads, you mentioned.
That's right, yes.
I'm wearing some lovely earrings from the range, and you've got a necklace and a bracelet on.
Yeah.
They're absolutely gorgeous. Tell me a little bit about, I guess, how did you find someone who was already making them, or did you work with the community to develop the product? How did it all start?
Yeah, well, my involvement with Fair Trade actually started as a volunteer with the association. And so I was involved in, I guess, the world for some time and got to know people working in the space, and got to know a lady called Rosemary Frank who founded Afro Beads about 15 years ago. And she actually went to Uganda like a lot of people do on a trip. She went to help out on a charity trip to help out build a school for an orphanage rather, and realised, the extreme poverty there in Uganda specifically, which is where the beads are made. And so she looked at what models she could use to help the locals, and she found that's when she found the fair trade model, and she found an existing small group that she could start to work with and develop. And she did a beautiful job of doing that over a few years. And about 2 years ago, Rosemary realised it's time for her to retire and do other things, and I have taken over the business since then. But in that transition time, I did go with Rosemary to Uganda, and I have visited the women. So it's really nice to have that personal connection with the people that you're working with.
Mm. So tell me, what is it in your working life or your personal background that has sort of led you to this point? You used to work in corporate, I understand?
Yes, I was in enterprise software for over 25 years, and working internationally and here in Australia as well. And so I guess I was always wanting to do more for the problems that I was seeing. So I mentioned that I travelled a lot in those roles, and it was through that I, the disparity between the way I was travelling, staying in 5-star hotels, and some of the poverty I was seeing was really extreme, and it always weighed on my mind. And I always felt that if I could use my powers for good, I wanted to. So I did start to dip my toe in sort of part-time. I started volunteering for the association, and, I did that for a few years. But like many people during COVID, I was like, right, it's now or never if I want to really do this full-time. And so I was part of the Great Resignation and left and start really, threw myself into it full-time then.
Yeah, why don't you just keep going? Just a bit more about
Yeah. So I guess a story that sticks in my mind when I get asked about why I do what I do is I was in Mumbai on a work trip, and I was in effectively like a limo, but a really nice car traveling between appointments. And, I had a lot of pressure on. I was thinking about work, and I was stopped at a traffic light. And I don't know if you've ever been to India or Mumbai. There's a lot of poverty there, a lot of extreme poverty, and a lot of children on the street. Very poor children. And there was this girl outside my window doing backflips just over and over again, hoping that I'm going to give her some money. And there's a whole crowd of children there. But I just remember watching this girl, and I turned to the guy in the car beside me who was a bit embarrassed about, the situation. But I mean, that was sort of happening all the time, and I was kind of constant. But this particular girl was really, I don't know, sometimes things just hit you differently. And I said, should I give her some money? And he said, oh, no, it's better not to. And we drove away, and it's always weighed on my mind that this girl was working so hard just to get that little bit of money, and I didn't give her any. And I thought, I have to do something. I have to do what I can to make a difference. And so I think those and other experiences like that I just felt I couldn't continue to live my life with the skills and experience that I have without doing something to try and improve the lives of the people that really needed it.
So tell me, what sort of skills do you bring to the social enterprise that you run from the sort of tech background?
So I guess I think one of the biggest is because I travelled so widely, understanding that how different it can be for different people in different places. So when I'm trying to sell something here, understanding that, their world is just so different. And I think anyone that's travelled you can get a sense for that, but it's easy to forget when we come back to our own homes and we're in our own space. So I think that's actually one of them. And also working in international environments, realising that you can actually work internationally, so not being afraid of that. On a business level, I think it's just those basic business skills. But for me, also having a very strong sense that, making money doesn't have to be a bad thing. Yeah, and that we can do this in a way that's positive, both for ourselves and for the people that we're working with and for the people that are receiving the product that we sell. So it can be a powerful good. And I did see that, in my work life at different times in different ways. And I also saw, bad actors as well that were the opposite of that. So I think, I really think in terms of what I bring, it's largely that broader experience than skills, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. So that brings us rather neatly to this topic, I guess, of social enterprise more generally. Obviously, not all social enterprises work in the fair trade area. What are you seeing at the moment? I understand you work with quite a few social enterprises or people in that sort of purpose space. What are you seeing in the sector? It feels to me like it's really burgeoning at the moment. Are you finding that?
Actually, yeah, which is a really great thing to see. I do think that a lot of people like me had a bit of a epiphany during COVID, and there was that whole, this feeling from people saying, right, I think people became much more aware of how they were spending their day and their time. And a lot of people were like, I actually want to spend my time better. So I think it's partly coming from that, and I think it's also something that's been building over time. But yeah, another thing that I do is I work with early stage founders to help them know how to sell into corporate, which is what I used to do, and that is really, really rewarding because again, helping them overcome this idea that selling something is pushy or aggressive, and realizing that actually, if you want to grow your social enterprise, you need to be comfortable in having conversations with people, and the fact that getting money is okay because that's actually what you need to grow. I also think that we're moving away from this idea of charity being the only model to help people is really powerful as well. And like I said, Fairtrade's been doing it for a long time, but that model's evolving, which I think is really important as well. So it's beyond just the tea and coffee. It has been for some time, but it's also, a lot of social enterprises out there are now service-based. They're doing all sorts of wonderful things, and I think it's really wonderful to see.
Yeah, and of course, the connections between charity and social enterprises is not new. Obviously, Oxfam and their fair trade stores is a very good example, which, as you said, they've been doing for a very long time. But it seems like there's a level of sophistication now with some of the charities that are setting up and running social enterprises as another income source, but also as a way to help, I guess, their beneficiaries, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting space to be in. Do you have any particular favourites?
I don't know. I certainly love, I love a lot of the social enterprises that I work with that are doing things in the product space in fair trade. So I do also sell some things retail through a brand called All of the Good Things, and one of the products that I sell is a beautiful eco-friendly brushes made from plant fibre. So they're vegan, they're plant fibre, they're helping a community in Sri Lanka. So I love that brand. I also love another brand that takes reclaimed bomb fragments from Laos and melts them down and makes beautiful jewellery. And there's just so many people doing amazing things out there. There's people that bring in beautiful hand-knitted items from Peru that work with an artisan group there, all made with beautiful alpaca wool. So that's Earthica. So I think there's just some wonderful, wonderful physical product brands out there that sometimes we don't think of when we think of social enterprise actually, or people in the social enterprise space often think more of service-based, maybe people helping with employment, which is all really great. But I do love the physical product stuff, the tangible stuff.
Yeah, it's a pretty diverse sector these days, isn't it? There's lots of different things happening, lots of different ways to slice and dice it.
There we are.
So you and I are both part of a network called Impact Collab.
Yeah.
How do you find that piece of, networking with other sort of, I guess, like-minded people, people in that space as a way to, survive the cut and thrust?
I find it absolutely crucial. And I was one of the founding members of Impact Collab actually. That was, it was such a, I was just so lucky that they had a physical space in Glebe where I was living. I walked past and walked in and said, tell me more. And it's become, apart from making some really great personal relationships, it's been really practically helpful because I, probably very naively coming from business, thought I know how to do this, but there's so much that I haven't known and so much that I've had to learn in coming into the space. And so having a community that can help with that and be supportive, but also practically helpful, I think is really great. But I have also learnt through the years working with Fair Trade that actually it's all about connection. Everything we do is about connecting. And in fact, one of the most powerful things about Fair Trade is that I'm working directly with the people on the other side of the world and building those connections. So I think that's what Impact Collab gives me here in Australia. It gives me that connection with people that goes beyond just a transactional interaction, but is stronger. And it's great. I love it.
Yes, the willingness of the sector to help each other out and talk about things that have worked and not worked, I think is really refreshing.
It's hugely refreshing, and I'm a big person that's in favour of collaboration over competition. I think competition has its place, but collaboration is really powerful, and actually just even shifting that mindset. Often when I'm coaching people actually around the sales piece, when people ask me, there's someone out there that I'm competing with, I'm like, well, have you thought about reaching out to them and having a coffee and seeing if there's a way you can collaborate? Because often, that whole saying, keep your enemies closer. Actually, they don't need to be your enemies. Turn them into your friends. But I think collaboration is great, and I've also found that hugely powerful. I would actually challenge, though. I've actually worked in the corporate space where I have seen a lot of great collaborations happen. And in fact, I think a lot of the best businesses will sit down and have those kind of conversations with people in the industry, in the space, to maybe talk about what's working, what's not working. Not everybody, for sure. There's definitely people out there that have a different view, but I have also seen some positive stuff in that space as well. And so I think there's huge power in collaboration, and it's really strong in the social enterprise space that we're in, which is great.
Yeah. So, it's interesting you say that, and I don't doubt it. I've never actually worked in corporate, so what do I know? I have had clients in the corporate world, some amazing, some not so. I think there's still this idea, people who are not involved, say, in social enterprise, are not very familiar with the model, that it's sort of an either-or thing. Either you're a bleeding heart and you don't want to make any money and you're just doing, goody-goody stuff, or you're sort of the cutthroat corporate, just riding roughshod. There's got to be a happy medium whereby plenty of corporates are doing good stuff, right?
Yes.
And I'm sure there are some very dysfunctional social enterprises out there. Yeah. But where do you see the kind of the future, I guess, of the model in terms of, can every business embrace the ethos of social enterprise without necessarily, taking it to the nth degree?
Yeah, I do actually, and I think that's where it's more powerful than a traditional charity model, because every business can be a power for good. And whether they make everything they do, focused on social outcomes, that might not make them a full social enterprise, but certainly every business can be a power for good. And there's obviously wonderful examples out there like Patagonia and all of the names that we know that are really, really powerful examples of how that works. But I really think it comes back to people. Businesses are made up of people, and there's people in every organisation that want to do good. And it's really just giving them, I think, the leadership, giving them the space and the ability to maybe try and do some of those things that they want to do. A lot of the positive changes that I have heard about, for example, in the sustainability space that are coming out of the larger corporates have come from staff-driven programs. And so I think that's a really powerful thing. And especially in this, world of AI where everything's getting automated, I think the power of us as individuals, as humans, to stay connected and to be able to use that humanity to see the bigger picture is what it's all about.
I feel like we're in a really interesting time at the moment. Almost like when you work in the purpose space, you tend to be surrounded by people who are, more or less like-minded, similar sorts of goals, similar ethos. Yes, trying to be authentic, trying to do good as much as they can, etc. And then you kind of look over the fence and just think, wow, who are the people who just haven't quite got the memo yet? And the irony to me is always that, commercially it does not make sense to not treat your workers well, to trash the environment when you are making a product, all that sort of stuff. It actually doesn't make economic sense. And yet it seems like that is still, for some people, very much business as usual.
Yeah, look, I think, I guess I've been talking about the positive side. There's a lot of not great things happening. One of the things that fair trade is quite closely linked to is, trying to work against human slavery, for example. And there's some really bad players out there that I wouldn't say are corporates, so just, they're actually organised crime in that space, which is just, the complete opposite end of things, terrible things going on in that space globally at the moment that seems to be getting worse, not better. And that's a really hard thing. But I guess, when I look over the fence and what I always also see are people trying to do something about those things. And so I feel the way that I keep my hope and I keep inspired is by connecting with those people who are trying to do something and also trying to do what little I can in my life on a daily basis. When I was just working a job that wasn't in an evil business, it was just a business, but it wasn't necessarily actively working for good. I always had this sort of niggling feeling that kind of like you're saying, you look over the fence and you see these bad things happening. What am I actually doing about it? I can't look at that and be critical if I'm not doing something. So I think, there's always this sort of yin and yang of it, I guess. I do think that the way that we consume our information and all of that sort of stuff means that we can be flooded with things that can bring us down, and it's important to give space for the light in that. So, I do limit the amount of news I read. I limit all of that stuff so that, or listen to or watch, I still stay connected so I know what's going on. But otherwise it can feel overwhelming that there's a lot of bad stuff going on out there. And there is a lot of bad stuff, but there's also a lot of good.
There is indeed, yes. We had a guest on recently on the show, Wei Yo, who I think you know,
who
recently brought out a book called Redundant Charities.
Yeah, it's great.
And I was wondering if you think that social enterprises or some of them should be also trying to build in that redundancy, particularly for an Afrobeads style company that is working, with communities. Is there a future goal to almost like hand that over? You mentioned at the beginning of our conversation that there are some enterprises that are sort of generational, which are now just businesses in their own right, don't need that kind of white savior input, if you will.
Yeah.
Is that where you think
that's a definite
they
goal.
should be headed?
Yeah. I mean, that's absolutely, I absolutely believe that should be the outcome. And certainly to clarify in terms of the way that the model works, so there's an Afrobeads enterprise in Uganda. They're their own entity, And the goal is that to help them become self-sufficient. Now, we're not there yet. It's a very micro group, and when I don't place orders with them at the moment, there's a gap, and that's what we want to get beyond. In my specific circumstances, it's really challenging because the group that I'm working with, the women aren't literate. They're only barely numerate. It's a very, poor country, and there's a lot of work to do there. In other countries that have been at it a bit longer, there's a bit more infrastructure in place, and so some of these micro businesses can connect up with larger organisations that support them. But in terms of redundancy, absolutely, I believe the goal should be to empower them as their own business people to build and grow. I think to do that, I would need to spend more time in Uganda working with them directly, and that is something that I'd love to do, over the next few years if I can. But yeah, I absolutely think that should be the goal, and it's why I like the model, because you can actually grow the impact you can have if you can help them grow their enterprise. And for me, it really does come down to, if somebody doesn't have an income and they can't feed their family, they're not going to care about the environment. They're not going to care about good working conditions. They're not going to care about any of those other things. So you have to start with the most basic thing. Having a basic income is where you start, and then you can build on that. And so if you can help them build an enterprise, which is giving that basic income to them and then maybe growing that, that's really, really impactful. And so, yes, absolutely, that's the end game. The end game isn't for me to grow my enterprise here from giving them. It's for me to be able to be them to be a supplier of a business and potentially other businesses as well.
So, final question from me. If I came to you and said, Nimmity, I'd love to start a social enterprise, what would you say to me? Where should I start?
Connect up with people is the first thing I would say. Talk to people and find some buddies to hang out with in the space. But I'd also say, go for it, because I think it is tough. Like I said, there's so much more that I didn't know that I'm still learning. But the rewards are huge, and if we all do our bit, then it's just so rewarding. When I received a box of stuff from Uganda yesterday, and I've got the name of each person that made each item, and I know that I've helped those women directly. That's a really great feeling. So nothing really beats that when you're actually having an impact. It's been great. Thanks.